And look, we've all tried it. Brian knows we've all. This is what happens. You run in with a new hurley in, and you bring back the same hurley out. You give the message and that same hurley out. Look, we know what goes on here.
I'm not finished yet. It took me a long time to get here.
Both players have spoken with each other.
So I want to start, Chaddar and Brian, with a quote from Richard Cody, Carlow player. And look, maybe I'm reading too much into this. I have a feeling you'll tell me that, Chaddar. He said he was talking about last week's game to Clare, and he was saying it's a quicker, more physical type of hurling at a different speed. It's still only January, and we haven't a whole pile of hurling done to get to the pitch of the game. He said we have to learn lessons to get back onto the field during the week and put them into practice. Hopefully we'll be better next Sunday. And this is the line I wanted to throw to you first, Chaddar, is we haven't a whole pile of hurling done to get to the pitch of the game. And I'm like, what the hell are Carlow doing? Like, is this not Carlow's biggest part of their year? Is this not a chance to test themselves against the big counties? And they're going into that they should be a championship pitch, no?
I'm surprised by some of the comments, Wooly, and then some of the other ones. You're right, you are reading too much into it, I think. Look, I suppose it just goes back to, what are your goals for the year, and what's maybe the medium-term goal for Carlow hurling? And certainly it is to sustain what the success and the development that they have now, and try and keep that going for a couple of years, and try and build, I suppose, the quality panel to be able to get up to the next step. But I would have thought that, certainly survival in the current league, and the league's not been easy now on some of these counties. Unfortunately, I think last year was a much better league for developing counties. But, staying there is crucial to your development. And, take it that, Carlow, their next goal, maybe their just singular goal is to win Joe Mack and come back up again into the championship. But I think they could have managed both of them very well. They have a very, very good team. Some of their players are backboning Carlow IT, who are playing in quarter-final if it's given tonight. And I'm just surprised a little bit about that. Now, look, some of the times players don't have a chance maybe to think of the response in these things. Yeah. What Richard seems to be saying is that we need to be doing a little bit more hurling, tactical hurling, game planning for the team ahead, and that we will be better prepared for that. But I think in the context of the game, you're going to Cusack Park and Ennis. It's a very, very difficult place. They've turned over all of the top teams down there, and will continue to do so. So I think it might have been taken out a little bit out of context. But if it isn't, I'd be surprised that there wasn't more focus done on an earlier conditioning program. Get them right for the league. Get your hurling and all of that right, and give yourself the best chance to perform well in some of these matches. Being realistic, some of these are tough calls for Carlow, and you may not, the genuine people will say, they may not expect the result, but they do expect the performance. And if you get performance, you can sustain that performance right throughout the year into the Joe Mack or into the Leinster or whatever you're in. But if you get some bad beatings in that, and maybe one person or two people walks away, and you have whingers and all of that going in, it can turn the other way very, very quickly. So it's hugely important that you really max out on performance and get as far as you can, and I do agree with him. You do keep learning. Everybody keeps learning about different things. So I think if you were to look at Richards and maybe put more context to it, I think it might have a different meaning, Willie. Right,
and maybe in his defence, he might have been a little bit embarrassed by the result. It might be just kind of making a little bit of an excuse to not make it.
Well, he shouldn't be, Willie, because all teams, the development counties, I'll call them, at that level have, Lisa went there myself to Q's. Now, in fairness, it was the knockout championship. I think Clare went on and won in All Ireland in 2013, one of the years that we were there, but they beat us well. And you've got to take these things on the chin. I think what's really important about the league, though, is, the quickness of play, the tactical play you're playing against, the standard you're playing against. That's what you should be measuring yourself again. You cannot walk away from that, and you cannot just say, look, our focus this year is on something else. We're not really performing here, because you're contradicting yourself. Then you really aren't learning anything. And the movement, I looked at Wexford on Saturday night, their movement off the ball, and that was phenomenal. That's what you've got to learn. You've got to learn how to track and how to tackle and how to hold up these players, and at the same time be creative yourself. You cannot learn that at the lower divisions. And I've just been beating this drum, Wooly, for as long as I'm on this show now, that that's the only place you can learn. Test yourself against the best. Of course, you need to keep improving, because you can't stay just testing yourself always and not improve and not get to that level. But you certainly need to have that ethos about you.
Yeah, you definitely. How hard is it, Brian, considering facilities and everything? Because I can imagine if your floodlights aren't perfect, it's impossible to have a game of hurling at training. You know what I mean? Because we know a lot of club grounds and things might have shoddy enough lights. That's impossible to play a hurling match with that.
Yeah, well, Carlow definitely don't have that complaint anyway, because they have fine facilities there in terms of their training grounds, and there's a few clubs around Carlow with good lights. But yeah, to take that point, it can be difficult, but I suppose most places now have good enough lights that you might even be able to play a possession game. And at this time of the year, and the way the game is going, it's around possession games or condition games, and I suppose you make the best of what you can do. And look, I suppose that's one place where Ireland is quite good, be it the National Lottery grants or the grants coming from the GAA themselves. Facilities in most clubs are up to some sort of decent standard. It mightn't be all equal or brilliant in every single club, but most clubs at this stage have some sort of facilities that can at least play condition games in training, and it's not just the slogging on a backfield doing laps of the field at this time of the year, which we all used to dread for years.
Right. Do you have a handball alley in the club? Damien Hayes gave a big speech on handball alleys and how teams don't use them enough, and the importance of them, and how it gets your eye in, and there's no better training for a hurler. And if you're not motivated to go to a handball alley a couple of times a week yourself, you won't be a top intercounty hurler.
Yeah, a few points on that. Yeah, look, we're very lucky in Kildare. We've savage facilities for such a small rural area. We've two fields. The top field it's a relatively new field. That's a carpet, and then we have a full ball wall, fully floodlit. It's one of the new ball walls, done by Banagher Concrete. They seem to be all over the country now. We've put AstroTurf down on that about 3 years ago, so that has really helped. For years, a lot of teams put in these ball walls, but for some reason they put chip-ins in as the base at the side of the wall, and it was an absolute disaster. It used to drive me mental. But you see a lot of clubs now move towards that. They have AstroTurf. The old traditional ball walls, I grew up playing on them down in Kilkenny when I was in school in Cairns. We used to have a couple there, and they used to be great because they had the side walls, and obviously they had a concrete floor as well, which to me is really important because the ball has to be able to bounce back up.
Right. So where do you say the AstroTurf? The AstroTurf's not.
So
on
the
the
AstroTurf is now on the ground. So at least the ball will bounce. So
okay.
That's really important. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because the chip-ins was a killer. Because if it hit the chip-ins, you couldn't work on your first touch, a low ball in your first touch.
That would make no sense to have bloody chip-ins on the
it made no sense. I know maybe it was just cost
saving
at the time, until they got, clubs got enough money to get it together. But it just seemed to annoy me at first. But the old ball walls were fantastic, as I said. Number one, the ball bounced back off the ground, maybe the concrete floor or whatever, and then the side walls were great for the for your first touch. Just the ball might come back a little bit differently. In terms of what Damien's saying, he's dead right in terms of the ball wall. I've always said this: it's your duty, and not your coaches, to have a good first touch. Going to training is to refine skills. You shouldn't have to be wasting the time of the coaches or the manager working on your first touch for months upon months. It's all about refinement and really just speeding things up in training. So yes, that time has to be put in away from the field. And it doesn't have to be a ball wall. A ball wall is a luxury, essentially. It can be the gable end of a house. How many times have we heard that? And I've done it for years myself. And there is that 10,000 hour rule for any elite sports person, no matter what sport it is, or even musician or whatever, to be the top of any level. They generally have to put in about 10,000 hours between the ages of, roughly 8 and 18. Roughly equates to about 2 hours a day of practice. Obviously not every day you'll get it in, but there'll be other days you might maybe get a few extra hours in. So you need to have put that time in. And I know anyone that's playing intercounty hurling would have put that time in down through the years. It does wane off later on as you get a little bit older. And obviously there's many different reasons for that.
We don't have much in Portlaoise Club, Cheddar, but we have a wall ball anyways.
No, we do. Yes. I'd say, Brian is right. Most clubs, certainly all hurling clubs would have. And I see a lot of football clubs use it as well, incidentally. Look, they're crucial, and I suppose I'll go back a little bit before Brian's to the old tradition was really the gable end of the house or the wall of the house or the wall of the shed or whatever the case may be. And if you look at some of the old literature, some of the old books, even in the recent past, when you look at DJ's book, and if you go a little bit back further to Nicky Rackard, and you see, I think the name of his book was the Barn Door or something like that, and Joe Cooney, all of the great players spent a huge amount of time at this. And if you look back to one of the most skillful hurlers of all time would have been Justin McCarthy, and even up to recently, or even still, he exhorts the use of the wall ball and all of that.
Would modern managers see it as old-fashioned?
Oh, absolutely not.
There's no manager wouldn't see the importance.
It's gone to a different level, to be honest with you,
Right.
Wooly. Brian's absolutely right. Crucial to sharpening the touch and the speed of the hands and all of that. And incidentally, any coaches that are listening, there's a huge amount of YouTube stuff out there, mainly driven by Paddy Butler. And I'd really say to any coaches or any club, get Paddy down, get Martin Fogarty down to go through all of the different drills that you can do in it. But and it's brilliant for coaches, for younger players, Willie, for spot and fix. So you have the players very close to you. They can strike the ball an awful lot of times. For example, even just simply striking the ball and hurling, where do you get the power? And most people will tell you you're going to get it out of your arms, whereas all of the coaches and all that will tell you get it out of your core and that. So is the right lead, is the right foot leading in the strike and all of these things? You have the player right close to you, you have good lights, you can video that. Incidentally, the next, I suppose, to go the extra mile really on this is to video your young players and send their form to your conditioning coaches, and they're able to do stills of the videos and draw little lines on it where the body shape should be. If you're really going to the absolute nth degree on this,
right,
there's an awful lot of stuff that you can do. Just back to I suppose years ago, I can certainly remember I remember being at home one day and we used to knock it off the back wall and that, and like Brian is saying, you spend hours at it. It was nearly a form of therapy, to be honest with you. But there was one particular day, I think the parents must have had guests, and in our house at home, the kitchen table was inside the kitchen window, and I must have hit the old ball anyway. We went straight through the window. So they were having the dinner, and as well as having the bacon, cabbage and spuds, they had it a la carte with glass. So there was all hurlers will tell you stories about the amount of time they spent on their own. I can certainly remember myself and Pat would have spent hours and hours going to. There was a ball alley in St. Vincent's. There was a couple of them in Ballyfin College, and we would have spent time. I often remember speaking to Paul Cuddy about the same. That every hurler would spend a huge amount of time. And Brian is right. Yeah. It's your own responsibility to get your first touch right.
All good, all good players. But here's Brian. Maybe tell me this is stupid now or not. But you look at any of the Joe McDonagh Cup counties, and you say to them, what separates them from the Tips and the Galways and the Limericks is maybe first touch. That moves break down because that ball doesn't go to hand, or a mistake by a defender. If you're saying that's on each individual, I don't think there's any excuse for not having a good touch. If you want to put in the work and go to a ball alley on your own time, there's no excuse for you not having as good a touch as a player from another county. Is that too simplistic for me? Or is the culture not there then in those counties that they're not going in their spare time and this is an easy fix? Because it's not about good coaches. It's about banging that ball up against that wall and from different angles, and you getting it straight from the hurley up into your hand, and do it until you bloody have it.
Yeah, I wouldn't agree fully on that. Now, I think players at all levels have good first touch and they have the same ability to put the ball over the bar. But there's probably two things. It's one, it's the speed to do it at, and two, it's the pressure under the circumstances in which they do it. So down the levels, you tend to see more open games. It's refereed differently. They have a little bit more time on the ball, and it's probably less physical. And I said, there's many different variables to that. And sometimes it is the refereeing or the players involved. Also, at the top levels, it's not that they're training harder or anything like that, but they've just simply got more quality. And we talked last week, and it's been widely put out about Brian Cody saying the genuineness of what he expects from his players. That's a first and foremost, and I think that's ultimately what all coaches try to instill in their players now. It's easy to have a good first touch, and that's not a throwaway statement. Anyone can go and practice. We can all do fancy drills in training with any coach, no matter who it is, but it's to be able to replicate that in pressurized situations on the big games where the games are extremely physical and there's a hell of a lot actually go.
Right. Okay. Is that it? Like, I don't. Again, I'm probably being too simplistic on it. I don't see if you're motivated to be an intercounty hurler, why your skill levels. When a wall ball works as well as it does, and it does work, it makes sense to me. You're replicating.
I think, Willie, it's much more complex than that. I take her point. It is one aspect to it. There's no doubt about that. I think Brian has explained it well. But the reason why, and I'm just using the developing counties that we sort of, generally speaking, classify them as that, aren't able to break through the ceiling to the top counties is much more complex than that. And you mentioned the word culture there. Is the culture around the hurling areas sufficiently strong, and is the talk around that sufficiently strong that every child goes down to the ball wall to knock it off? It isn't, and you need to develop a huge amount of key things within the community to make that happen. And if you want to step it up, there's another level then at intercounty level. So you'll just think for a minute the training at Kilkenny, Tipperary, Cork, Galway, Limerick. The intercounty training that they would have, you're going to have about 40 players of a very, very high standard technically, let it call a first touch, whatever you want to. So you just simply don't need to do any first touch. All your coaching at intercounty at that level is primarily in tactical training or, running phases of your method of play, of your game plan or something like that. And they're able to do it because they're technically more gifted. But I would say, and I think Brian would back me up in this, that maybe the top 10 players in the Carlows, Offaly's, Laois, Westmeads, Antrims and so on are as good and would claim a place in most county teams, but the next 30 may not be anywhere near as strong as those 30. Yeah. And I always think that the most important players in your panel are actually 25 to 30. Not necessarily your 14, 15, 16, because they're the guys that are going to drive the fight for the jersey. And these counties have that, and the quality of the training, you can go flat to the mat, whatever you want to do, and you won't have spilling a ball and all of those things. The moves won't break down, people won't lose confidence in what you're doing and all of that. So I think there's a whole pile of different things going on, and what you mentioned is one aspect, Willie, but there's an awful lot more than that.
Right, okay, fair enough. There's two bits of news, lads, before we start talking about the games. So the GAA has banned hurley water carriers from using walkie-talkie radio systems. So every county is obviously trying to get a leg up on the others. So you're allowed to have your runner mic'd up.
The Mayor Fuerna,
Mayor Fuerna, he's allowed to be mic'd up. But now Limerick last year mic'd up Brian Geary, who's a hurley carrier. Now water carriers this is the funny thing, this applies to hurling rather than Gaelic football. Water carriers are not allowed onto the field, but hurley carriers are. So when the hurley carrier goes in to give a new hurl or whatever, he's mic'd up Brian, and Limerick exploited this, and Wexford exploited it. They were the two counties mentioned in the article. That Keith Rossiter did it for Brian Geary. He's not with Limerick this year. Keith Rossiter did it with Wexford, so that's been banned. No big deal here. It's just a bit of news. Nothing really much to say about it.
It's going a bit too far, being honest. Like the fact that they're trying to block this sort of stuff. And I even heard muted that they're trying to get rid of the Mayor Fuerna altogether. And obviously the manager can't enter the field, so they want nobody encroaching on the field, with the exception obviously of a hurling carrier in those extreme situations. I just think we've a lot more bigger issues, that definitely in hurling anyway, than trying to get messages onto the field. I know I was more Fuerna last year for Offaly in that couple of weeks I was in there, and I tell you one thing, I nearly ran as much. I'd like to see my GPS numbers on that, in and out, in between plays, trying to get messages onto it. It's tough going. And I can only imagine what it'd be like in front of a packed Crow Park. It must be next to impossible to get messages onto the players. And obviously, you have to trust obviously the work has to be done beforehand, but players have to try and figure it out on the field themselves as much as anything else. I think it's a little bit too mad. They even have the rule now that the water carriers can't be someone officially. It can't be a selector. It can't be someone in the backroom team, and it can't be one of the non-playing. Panel members. Yeah. So it's I can know there's reasons for that, maybe that sometimes the non-playing players might get a bit heated and get involved with other players.
I think that's a fair point, because Peter Crowley in the football squirted water at one of the Dublin players in the All-Ireland final. That you'd be too emotionally invested as a sub that's not or injured or whatever like that. I don't know.
Sorry, just a small thing on that. That's all good and grand. You're playing First Division National Hurling League, and you've got any amount of guys clambering to help out with teams and come along as backroom staff and go along as water carriers or hurley carriers, go down to divisions and try and get people to come up. Say you're hurling against Wicklow, or you're hurling up against Derry or whatever. There's not going to be a big clamour of people to come and help you in those days.
No, probably. I don't know what benefit is there anyways, because you have your Mayor Ferner that runs in and he's allowed to be mic'd up. He'll run in with a message. How many messages do you have? So you have your hurley carrier then, and there's an off chance then that fella breaks his hurl, right? Would John Kiley not just tell Geary, here, tell him this? Why doesn't he? I can understand Davy with Roster.
Well, he might be on the other side. Sorry, before Cheddar comes in, he might
he'd be on the other side. Is right. They're all lined all around the field, isn't there? Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So obviously, there'd be a reason there, Cheddar. Brian's just answered that question.
Yeah, and Brian's spot on here. Well, I don't think they're talking about banning them off the sideline, Willie. It's just really that they're not mic'd up.
They're not mic'd up, yeah.
So if it's not the farmer, what's the problem? They're not interfering with play. They're not causing any problem or anything like that.
They're just giving a message to a player.
Look, they can only go in if the hurley is broken. The rules are there. Yeah. Apply the rules. And I just, I'm just surprised with all of that type of stuff, to be honest with you. And I just think, for years and years, the GAA was considered a dinosaur organisation. And here we have with a little bit of technical innovation, and maybe some players taking a little bit of an advantage, or some teams taking an advantage by using that innovation. And is it doing any harm? I don't think it's doing any at all. Now, no. I think it's a bit of a knock-on from, the Mayor Fair going onto the field, and maybe other fellas like myself going onto the field, and so on. Maybe it's a knock-on effect of that. But people just need to separate what they're talking about here. What's the problem? Deal with the problem, and leave everything else, well enough alone. Just apply the rules, I'd say. I mean, if you wanted to knock off if you wanted to cause problems with that, you could just simply get a radio frequency jammer, stick it in the stadium, and you'll have no. You can throw your radios in the bag. You might even need now a license or something like that to do it. But look, there's a whole lot of other things they could do without having a big issue about nothing, really.
I'm glad you said about nothing, because here's a story, Brian. Imagine a man breaks his hurl. I don't know anything about it, but you break your hurl, you frantically wave your hurl. The hurley man, if he's any good and if he's not in like a shot, he won't be used again, I can presume. So the manager has to see the lad waving the hurl, has to see the hurley lad running into him, and then has to think of a message off the spot of what he wants to say to him. Like, I mean, what benefit even is there in having them mic'd up, number one, and even banning it then, number two?
Yeah, just sometimes, I agree in those situations. Obviously, it's maybe they want to get a message across the other side of the field, and it's just a lot easier than maybe a Moore Ferner actually getting across. It might be just harder because the Moore Ferner can only enter from right in front of the dugout as well. There's that rule, and
right. So the lad with the extra hurls could be walking up along the other sideline and shouting in the instructions from the manager. Then is that
exactly.
kind of that's what they're trying to avoid?
Well, I'm going back to the rules again, Wooly. The rules are he has got to stay in a certain position and he can't move from there.
Right.
Now he can come into the field.
But only when
the hurl breaks. And look, we've all tried it. Brian knows we've all. This is what happens. You run in with a new hurley in, and you bring back the same hurley out. You give the message and that same hurley out. Look, we know what goes on here. Is that not as simple as the sideline man sees you going in, and he sees the same hurley going back? And look, if he does take action on it, rather than
report it,
or something like that. I just think it's just too much for.
But sure, even look, I agree with you. It's just too much. Even so, what if he gets a message?
Correct.
Like, come on. Seriously, what? Like, it's not the third secret of Fatima.
I'd agree, Brian, and I even come in stronger than that, and I would say, look, if that piece of instruction improved the game for supporters and for spectators, isn't that what we're all about? Trying to improve the game here.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think
if they're interfering with play, it's different.
Fully agree.
Look, I've been involved in plenty of club game, and we had a famous incident years ago where one of the hurley carriers ran into one of the players. Do you know what I mean? And right in front of the referee and got away with it. Poleaxed them. We've seen loads of videos of that sort of stuff. But that's different.
Yeah, not being mic'd up, Brian, isn't going to fix that.
No,
that's true.
No, exactly. So like that, I just think we're trying to fix something that's not broken, I think.
Okay, another one here, lads, bit of news before we move on to the matches, is the ban on WhatsApp. So the use of WhatsApp, the GAA have prohibited it, or they've advised clubs not to use it because it breaches GDPR and data protection and things like this. Obviously, you create a WhatsApp group in the club, you add 30 different members. their photo and their number is clearly available to anybody else in the club without them saying that's okay for me to have done that. So I don't really know what to think about this. There's clearly an issue around giving your number and allowing some other club member have your number and stuff like that, Chaddar. It's very, very handy. There's a club force that 600 GAA clubs use, and it's free, and it doesn't have the same issues with GDPR at all. So the GAA are talking about developing their own software. They're advising against the WhatsApp. I'm just wondering what you think of it.
I suppose there's just two aspects to it, really. I suppose, Willie, look, GDPR is there's a lot of legislation around that, and if WhatsApp is not compliant with that, well, then you got to change it, because you're leaving yourself wide open to litigation if you don't. And I think the next point I'd make on it is it's probably different for juveniles than it is for adults. And I'm not well enough up on GDPR legislation, but I would think that if a senior team, for example, all signed into that, we were happy enough to go with this. Well, look, that takes, I would assume that takes the issue of GDPR a little bit away from it. So you'd probably need a lawyer here to talk about GDPR legislation and what's compliant and what isn't. I can certainly fully understand juveniles and that particularly you'd have really, really big panels and all of that. And
they're not allowed on the WhatsApp group. Well, so their parents are the ones that have to contribute to the WhatsApp group, apparently.
Yeah, I'd say there may be a lack of control on that. But I probably would sort of come in behind that, Wooly, because there is clear legislation around at the minute. There's some EU directives and all of that about it as well. You certainly wouldn't want to be non-compliant with that and then leave yourself open. But look, it's a fantastic medium to get a message out there and so on, and to be able to send some stuff down. Some of the other communications mediums don't allow you to send video snatches and all of that down the line here. So, and I do know the GAA are quite good at that, and innovative, I suppose, and looking at ways of doing this. And there's other things that they do as well. But if it isn't available and you can't use it, I think the GAA should certainly look at if there is other methods and systems out there. Well, then they need to get into clubs and explain it to them and that, and
Yeah, no, exactly. Like, I do take the point for a senior team, if everybody signs up for it, Brian, that would probably fix the GDPR issue. There's another issue then as well, is if somebody puts up a video on the WhatsApp group and leaves the WhatsApp group, the administrators can't remove that video as well. Or there's a few different issues. But definitely for management teams, it would be a huge loss. WhatsApp groups, definitely. But like the point Chaddar makes, I don't think it should affect senior teams. I think this might affect juvenile teams where parents are involved and are having numbers shared around, when that's not what they want.
Yeah, I suppose there's a couple of things there. Like WhatsApp have released a statement yesterday saying that as part of groups, the admin can invite people into a group as opposed to automatically put them into it.
Right.
And that puts the onus back on the parent or whoever the individual is to when they join that group, they know that their name and number and picture is readily available to everyone else in the group. So the person then has the option whether to opt into that group or not. And I think that was a good move by WhatsApp to put that information back out there to the general public. And it is a way to try and overcome that GDPR issue. Okay. And it is, look, to people that are into it, personally I'm not, it is a serious issue. And there is an ombudsman for GDPR and all those sort of things. And anyone that's maybe involved in work know the importance around emails and all that sort of thing, BCC and that side of things. But and just going back to Club Force, I thought the club have to sign up to that. I think there is a monetary payment for that, and then obviously it's free to the individuals. And I think it's something similar there's another app out there at the moment with Clubify, I think it's called.
Okay.
Now they do have other aspects than just obviously messaging, but that there are a couple of alternatives at the moment, and it'd be just interesting to see. Obviously GA are talking about bringing out their own app in the summer. I just thought this message maybe could have waited till they actually had a readily available tool of overcoming this. Because this was broached last year. I read about this last year in relation to the GEA. The GDPR legislation really came into force a couple of years ago, and I read extensively about this last year from the GEA and where they didn't want people engaged in WhatsApp because of those fears. So it's just interesting why it came back around this week in particular when they don't have an alternative just yet.
Kind of came out of the blue, all right. Without, it would make sense to launch their own one and say this. But
in fairness to this one, Willie, I think it came up at a Laois meeting as far as I know, and maybe the person in charge of the GDPR related things in the county just brought this as a concern. Look, I'll be very surprised if WhatsApp don't find a technical solution to this. I know they have broadcast lists out there. You can't really PM players because that defeats the purpose of the whole thing. But I'll be surprised if this is going to be an issue for GDPR. It's a much wider issue, and I'll be surprised if WhatsApp don't find a technical solution to it anyway. Yeah,
and another point on WhatsApp, while it's very handy, it's gone absolutely crazy with regards unfounded rumours recently. You have the Boris Ali players being smeared pretty much. You have a terrible rumour going around recently about Jim Gavin, which is unfounded. Shane McCallan and Paddy Maher was another rumour. It's the WhatsApp groups. Once it arrives in one cheddar, it's all free for all. It's desperate stuff.
I know that, but Willie, look, it doesn't need to be in any WhatsApp. If a person wants to start a rumour, he just needs to say, I saw an email the other day, or I saw a text, but
it's spreading like wildfire with the WhatsApp, though.
I know it does, but look, that's where the world is. We're not going to be able to stop that. I think what is needed in those situations is genuine GAA people to stand up and kill those things early and speak in favour of players or managers or whoever. And anybody that they come in contact with that tells them or says, no, you know what I heard, I was in the pub last night and I heard this, and if you don't think it's true, tell them straight up, keep it, I don't want to hear it, keep it yourself, I don't believe that. So I think that there's probably a responsibility in all this. Look, this is where the world has gone, and everybody has got to face the same thing. We just see it with politicians at the minute where they are. Everybody's caught up in this, and it's probably going to be a number of years down the line before the thing will start to bottom out again, that these type of things will go away.
Yeah, I never send on stuff like that. I just wouldn't. Morally, there's enough stuff gone around about me without forwarding on somebody else.
I think there's another thing. What's important, teams need to have protocols when they're using WhatsApp, and anybody that steps out of those protocols within the team, does he deserve to be in the dressing room in the first place? I know that's easy to say at county level and at senior level, and that maybe it's just a junior level, it might be a little bit different where your commitment to the team and that may not be the same. But if you have protocols, that's your part of your manager's job as well, and part I suppose of the culture within the organisation and that.
Yeah, okay, great stuff. We'll come back with some analysis. All right, a little bit of analysis here, lads. And the big game, you'd have to say, this weekend has to be Clare versus Wexford, because two of the top teams in the country, and we have, of course, Davy versus Brian Lohan. Two friends, teammates, turned, let's be honest, nemesis, rivals, enemies at this stage. Let's be honest, it all started when UL played LIT. And Brian, we all know this story, that UL were the favourites. They had the star-studded team, and LIT got off the bus, came in through the hedge and started warming up on the UL side of it. Beat UL against the odds. Lohan didn't like it at all. Himself and Davy had words after it, and it's pretty much gone downhill since then, where there has been no let up really in the kind of, I don't know, public animosity.
Yeah, and it's so unfortunate because they were almost a duo, Davy being the goalie and Brian Lohan so iconic with the red helmet and such a stylish fullback. Arguably the last of those type of fullbacks as well. They really came as a pair, and it is a pity to see so much of this happen. And so much of it probably out in the public sphere. Of their fallout, and Brian Lohan spoke at length about it last year, and. It is a pity, but I suppose that's life, and that's just the way that it goes. It adds to the drama about Sunday as well, though. That's great from the general public's point of view, and it just you're going to relish it. And down in Wexford as well, there's a real partisan crowd down there, so they're going to get behind their man. And I suppose a little added twist in there, Brendan Bugler, after winning the All-Ireland with Clare, is down in Wexford, involved. The surprising thing if I see with Bugler, and is that he was muted as being a forwards coach.
Well,
I don't know if that
no, well,
to
Conor
throw people.
Right, maybe,
Like,
because Conor MacDonald said that he did a media day in the club launch, and I have this down in my notes that he's a forwards coach. Couldn't possibly, could he be?
that could be just another thing, a little thing that Davy could be throwing out there. Look, let people believe that, and let them, let no one know what's actually going on inside the circle. So like little nuggets like that, I would not be surprised. Bugler was involved with St. Flannan's there the weekend to beat ourselves in Templemore there last Saturday. They played a very structured game, played a sweeper. Now, seventh defender, I'll call it, because he got up the field and he hurt us big time up the other end of the field. So you could see why Davy has him down there, because they obviously think about the game very, very similarly and have the same values and what they expect from their hurling teams.
Right, interesting enough. Brian Lohan, the last thing he said about Davy is just to be interesting to see them on the sideline, Cheddar, because we know what Davy's like on the sideline, and Brian would be a much more kind of relaxed sort of individual. He said about Davy on the sideline, I don't know if it's genuine passion. We're all passionate about the game. We show it in different ways. So he has his way of doing things, and people kind of have to fit into that. But some of the antics, they're not great. So there'll be no handshakes this weekend anyways. It probably is sad to see that, but look, I don't know, would that rivalry between those two overshadow the game, or how would it feed into it?
It won't. Is the first question. It's the answer to your question. Both of them will be totally committed to their team. I'm not going to add to any of that. Just to make 2 points. A little bit disappointed that that the relationships between the two have broken down, considering they were, as Brian has alluded to, that they were obviously huge friends for a long, long time. I can understand it. I know both, and both are very, very driven men, and sometimes things like that happen. And my last comment in it is I just think both of them, they may not be friends again, although I certainly would like to see some influential people in Clare bringing it back together again, if that was possible. But just stay away from the public domain in terms of comments and views and that, and just tone it down and let it go. There's much more important things in life than just scoring points off of each other, and that is all I would say on it. Right,
okay, fair enough. Well, you were at Wexford Laois last Saturday night then, so how good were Wexford? Eddie Brennan said there were a lot of things that pleased me. This about the Laois performance. He said I think Wexford rolled out 3 players short of the strongest team. We were all over the place in the first 12 minutes with Wexford's running game.
I'd probably disagree with Eddie a little bit in that. Maybe I'd speak more positively, and maybe I'll speak about Wexford first. Their movement, their fitness, first of all, to be able to play the game that they're trying to play is of a very, very high standard. And their movement off the ball, and some of the movement is definitely pre-planned to drag you out of space and to make space and those type of things, was quite impressive, except that the next piece on it, the execution of distribution of the ball to the right man in the right place to get the score, probably didn't really work for them. So I have to say I was very impressed with a lot of aspects for Wexford. They're in really, really good place. Next Sunday is a fantastic match for them to test themselves, because Clare are used to, in training over the last 7 or 8 years, playing that type of game and tracking players all over the field. The difficulty with that is if you can perfect that really well, it disrupts you. Because you are now, tearing around the field to make sure that, their players not getting into the open space to pick the pass and that type of stuff. But at the same time, you're not in your right place now to be able to get your game plan going, and sometimes the pressure can be too much on your break. And I'll just come back to Eddie's point. I thought actually Laois were missing a number of players last Saturday night, on top of the number of players that we know that are going to be missing anyway. They're missing a few players through injury and that, and some of them are forwards that certainly would expect them to score some scores for you. But there wasn't that much in it up to maybe the last 15-20 minutes, maybe the last 20 minutes, and certainly Wexford's fitness levels, and more than anything else, I suppose, their mobility around the field. I'd say Laois ran out of steam a little bit at that stage. But I thought, I'm obviously looking at the game here through rose-tinted glasses. I thought that Laois handled that tracking of Wexford players and cutting off the options and that, pretty well for a long part of the game. And, I'd be interested to see, how other teams will handle it, because I just think that if Wexford get their distribution from defence right and get, link up that type of play where they either had to pick the pass or pick the pass to space, similar to what they did in the All-Ireland semi-final, they're certainly still on an upward curve. They're certainly still improving, and I think they're a major threat. The one little thing I would say about him that I've just constantly said about him maybe over the last couple of years is that their ability to be able to take that score under pressure or take that score in very small space, being very, very clinical on the ball, needs to improve for them to win in All-Ireland, I think. And I constantly reference John McGrath bubbles in that type of play, whereas their work rate and their movement off the ball and on the ball and support play and all of that is of a very, very high standard. But when the creation of the actual scoring opportunity and the execution of that scoring opportunity, I think will have to improve before you'd say, yeah, they're definitely on track to win in All-Ireland here.
Right, okay, that's interesting. Just on the running game, Brian, how do you counteract the running game? Is this a matter of some players switch off and don't track? How Donald Logan last Saturday night, I spoke to Damien about it, talked a lot about the spare hand, and the players are using that cynically now to kind of maybe half pull a player back. Is that what you kind of have to do against Wexford to try and stop this running game?
Yeah, definitely. And look, that's a big part of the game for quite a long time now. I think that's, I know Donald Logan has been on about this for the last couple of years, and he's actually right, but it's a big part of the game. It's a big part of the way you coach people how to tackle, deny that, and then, try and hold them up with the hand. And, it does lend itself to football, but, what you don't want, and which would probably be more traditional, so you don't want your players coming in with a big shoulder charge, because number one, odds are you're going to miss them. But two, if you do hit them, it leads to these big, head high hits, and that's what leads to the red card. So that's where you go mad. You coach your players to use that spare hand to actually hold them up in possession and try and dispossess them then, or stop them from playing the ball away. The running game is very hard to counteract. If only I knew how to do it a little bit better, I could have got it over the line on Saturday, or tried to relay those messages. But you're right, you need players switched in that, maybe forwards in particular, when an awful lot of time forwards obviously are so concentrating on winning the ball and scoring, but the minute they're out of possession, that they have to become defenders and proper defenders, and track and runs probably lends itself to football. Now, footballers are probably more natural at doing that, but hurling we're slower to get into it.
But just on that, Brian, Jim McGuinness won an All-Ireland because teams hadn't copped on and forwards hadn't copped on about work rate and tracking, and he won an All-Ireland, and now everybody knows about it, that the minute that turnover happens, everyone on the team's like a defender. That message hasn't sent through to hurlers maybe yet, and that's why Wexford...
It is in terms of, it's there in terms of, in Kilkenny we're probably the first team to really start doing it, that tackling ferociously hard up in the forwards, and trying to stop the ball at source, back down in the opposition's half, and try and hold it up there, and turnovers and all that. But tracking runners is a different thing completely. That's probably slower.
That's new. That's new.
And I know personally, it's a horrible thing to do. You're playing half forward, and next minute your wing forward is bombing up the field, or wing back, is bombing up the field, and they're taking you out of your comfort zone. Instead of you looking for your defender to mark you end up having to do the marking, and it's something that's completely alien to you. So it's tough. And if a team like Wexford, who are very, very adept at it, and they use their spare defender really well, they use their possession really well, and often, as we see with Wexford now, those defenders, or that 7 defender, is getting up the field and creating overlaps and scoring opportunities. That's very, very hard to counteract.
That's the thing. Tracking a lad with the ball is easy, Cheddar. Tracking a lad who makes a run that doesn't have the ball, you're kind of like, I'm not too sure I want to go after this lad.
Yeah, and it's even more sophisticated than that, Wooly. And I think Wexford are well on the road for this. And look, Limerick do this brilliantly. That's why I'm so keen on Paul Kinnerk. The run has some purpose to it. It's not just running around like a chicken. The run has some purpose to it. You simply cannot let him go. So I'll put it in context. Would you let TJ or Joe Canning go? If you do, they'll ping. In hurling, you can ping the ball to hand in seconds from 50-60 metres easily. Or in the rolling from the goal can ping the ball to a corner forward in maybe 20 seconds. So you simply cannot leave people go, and that's the difficulty. Brian has explained the difficulty. Really, you might have a set of forwards with an absolutely brilliant game plan, but they're all in the wrong place. And your game plan now is a little bit more difficult, and it's a little bit more difficult for you to get a foothold in it. And it brings it back to something else, Wooly. First of all, I predict that hurling, the next breakthrough team in hurling is going to get this really right. And a corner forward will not be really, he'll be just a nominal corner forward. He'll turn up at corner back and he'll work the ball up the field. It'll be that type of player. And I think when you look at Wexford, some of their big players that over the last couple of years would have been positional players. It might be Liam Ryan, or it might be, those type of players who were big physical players holding their position. They're not holding it now, I can tell you. They're bombing up and down the field there as well as anybody else. So I think the type of player you have is going to change a little bit, and the type of training you're going to do is a little bit different. You need athletic, flexible players with good touch, and with good peripheral vision and good understanding of where they need to be and all of that. And I certainly see a lot. And I'm actually very interested in Brendan Bugler being in with Wexford. You've got to bear in mind, I hear what you're saying about him, that maybe he's a forwards coach, maybe he's looking at that middle third. But you've got to think about him. He was a very, very offensive wing back. And why can't an offensive wing back who understands the type of ball that needs to go up the field? He understands the first part of that. He also understands that he can only give that ball up the field if the forwards are tackling like animals. And I think there's some little secrets here to that that sort of underpin that type of game, that if you don't get them right, you're not going to be able to play that game. And I think Brendan played like that when he was playing.
Yeah, okay, that's fair enough as well. Wexford have 11. We're used to seeing this from Wexford. Wexford had 11 different scorers against Laois. And interestingly, Kilkenny had 12 different scorers against Dublin, Brian, isn't it? Like, I'd say 10 years ago, this wouldn't have been the case at all. I'd say defenders cleared it up to the forwards and the forwards went to score. And I don't know, is it a combination of players getting up to support attacks, or is it other teams dropping off them and leaving halfbacks kind of free for a shot? You know what I mean? It's a combination of a couple of things.
Yeah, definitely a combination of both. The halfbacks in today's game, obviously not all three of them are going to bomb up the field. There's always going to be one trying to play space, whether that's a centre back or a wing back falling into the pocket or whatever. But yeah, they're definitely more supportive in their runs, trying to get up the field and create that overlap situation. And then, as you said, sometimes they're just there in the pocket and they're able to have those pot shots. It automatically springs to mind of Diarmuid Burns. How many times have we seen Limerick work that ball out to Diarmuid Burns all on his own, and from 70, 80 metres he's able to put that ball over the bar. And I know people will say the sliotar is lighter. It is slightly lighter. It hasn't changed that much over the years. Like, players are striking the ball more fluidly and better. Hurls are better. Players are stronger. There is a number of factors there why players are able to put the ball over from 17, 80 metres now.
Quickly here, we mentioned something about this recently, myself and you, Brian. I'll remember it when we start talking about Shane O'Donnell was interviewed about the league, and he was talking about, I never really realised this, is that Division 1B is the Leinster Championship plus Clare. And then Division 1A is the Munster Championship plus Galway. Like, you would prefer a bit of a mix, but Shane O'Donnell doesn't like the mix. He wants to play Munster teams, which I was surprised about. He says, personally, I like to play against the players I'll be playing against in the championship. I think it's down to me as being a corner forward. I like knowing the person I'm going to mark. I like to know how he likes to play. I like building up confidence from having previously marked that player. Other people might look at it differently, but that's my take. Oh, that was it. Pádraig Walsh said it about Tullaroan playing novelty teams that they don't know anything about. That was it, Brian. I would have thought a defender would prefer to get a heads up on what Shane O'Donnell's going to do. I understand it's important for both, but I would understand that Shane O'Donnell is kind of element of surprise. Brian, you're the corner forward. Well, Chaddar was too. You're the corner forward scorer. Chaddar was the target man. I would imagine that it's more important for the defender to know the forward than the other way around.
Well, firstly, I suppose, Shane, there is hurling outside of Munster. That's the first thing I would say. A little bit of snobbery there, in fairness. God forbid that some other teams might come and play against the mighty Munster teams. I don't know. I obviously, he said it himself, but that's his view on it, and he's fully entitled to it. But if Clare or whoever and Munster have ambitions to go on and actually win an All-Ireland series, you're going to have to come up against teams in Leinster.
You're getting defensive about Leinster now. I don't think it was a dig at Leinster. This could have been any team. He basically, the point he's making.
But the teams he plays in Championship, like, that's my point though. Like,
the point he's making is that he wants to play. He wants to play
the whole season. If you want to win All-Ireland, which is the ultimate goal for, as I said, for I would think 9 out of 10 intercounty teams that are playing in Leinster and Munster this year, is to win the All-Ireland. Like, you're going to have to play them, yeah, and that's a fair point, yeah. So that's my point, is that you're going against that. Where looking at those comments as they are, that's a viewpoint of I'm actually only interested in the Munster Championship because they're the only teams I'm going to come up against.
Okay.
So that's the point I'm trying to get back across. To go back to the point that you asked me, forwards generally, I kind of said it earlier. Generally, you want the back marking you, and you're trying to create space, and you don't really think too much about you try to think of I'm going to play my game, and try and figure out and create space and make movement and come off the shoulder of different players or whatever, make a run for a ball, and it's up to the back to figure it out and counteract me. But he definitely has a point as well. You do hurl differently on whoever you're marking. Again, players spring to mind for me would have been, say, if I was marking Paul Murphy. I knew, particularly the way Kilkenny played, Paul Murphy was unbelievable at attacking the ball, bald-headed, like literally going out like a train. And whether it was high or low, he attacked that ball and he just brought it forward in front of him. And the one thing you didn't want to do with Paul Murphy, say if you were at hurling at 15, was run in a straight line, run out the field towards that number 12 position, because Paul Murphy invariably came out of it. If you think about it, how many times have you seen that?
Yeah.
If you were marking someone like Paul Murphy, you'd have to be saying, right, I have to make diagonal runs, I have to get to the other side of the field, I have to try and turn the tide so that I'm not being caught in these situations, where you'd be looking hopefully that your number 14 or even 13 will be getting across in those diagonal runs and you're doing vice versa to the other side. So he definitely has a point in that.
Yeah. What do you think, Chaddar?
Just on a couple of the points, Wooly, I'm surprised, and maybe, like everything else, you need to go back and look at the context of the interview and the flow of the interview and that. Well, I'd be surprised that he said he just wanted to play Munster teams to learn, because certainly most of the Leinster teams play differently. And, if you want to learn and test yourself and figure out how to play against opposition, methods of play and all of that, well, look, it's the best thing to do is to play against them. That's the best way you're going to find out. I'm not surprised that he's analysing opposition, and I'm particularly not surprised that it's Shane said that. And I think, look, all teams do that. Like I would think an intercounty management team, manager and coaches, if they don't have a dossier on every team they're going to play this year, on every player they're going to play this year, his weaknesses, his strengths, and all of those things, to be able to have that discussion with the player that's going to play on him on the following Sunday, I'm not so sure that they're doing their job at that level.
I read the one you had about, was it with Offaly years ago, too, Chaddar, by the way.
Oh, go on, Brian, fill us in there.
We were playing Leash. I don't know, was it a
What did he say about
copy,
you?
What did he say about you? A genuine copy? No, I was too old to finish to that stage, so... I don't know if it was a genuine one or it was the one made up by our management, but there was definitely one circulated around our dressing room one time, so it's quite funny actually.
Only believe half what you hear. Brian is also. No, but on a serious level, and I am taking that's a joke, Brian. No, on a serious level, look, and this goes back, there's a lot of things that we discuss here that are relative to a lot of parts of the conversations. When you're under pressure in any walk of life, you revert to type, and you revert to your habits that you have formed since you were probably a child. And that's how it's so difficult to coach teams to play in a different way. But if players have certain habits and you can put enough pressure on them, you can absolutely bet your bottom dollar, and we've looked at enough videos now over the years to prove this point, that they'll play the way you expect them to play. So let's just talk, for example, about an air game and the way a player approaches the high ball coming in. Whether you're a defender or whether you're a forward makes the difference. And Paul or Brian has given a good example given a different example there. If you know that in advance and you can disrupt that player in terms of what he's doing, either bring the ball to ground or whatever, look, doesn't it give you an advantage? And isn't it right then that you need to be sort of, without going overboard on it, you kind of go in with a whole folder of things to a player and overload him with information the week before the game. But you certainly can give him some key statistics about what players do, which I think would be of major advantage to you. And I think what Shane is saying here is, look, this is what we would have been doing with Clare over the last couple of years. We have a dossier on every player in Munster, and maybe that's why he wants to play Munster teams. So if I'm playing on whoever, Shane Fives or something like that, Brian has explained one of the things that Paul does that you simply cannot allow to happen. Paul Murphy's a hugely strong man. If he's going hip to hip with you out to the ball, there's probably just going to be one result in that. And when he gets it, he's gone 3 or 4 meters ahead of you. So Brian's just explained one way of disrupting Paul Murphy. And Limerick done another thing to Paul in Thurles a couple of years ago. They ran out and popped the ball over his head and then turned him for goal. So somebody somewhere, thought through a solution how to figure out to try and take Paul's strengths away. I don't want to. Paul Murphy's a fantastic player. And a fantastic
well, you
man.
understand your
But
point. He's a
understand
straight
the
like
comfort.
he'll take you in ball and he'll get a big cheer from the crowd, and that's his game. Yeah.
Without a doubt he will. So look, I'm not surprised, and I would be surprised that managements don't have doshers on every single player. And bear in mind, the other side of that, you're playing in Munster. You're going to be playing all of those counties every year for the next 10 years. So if you're in 19, you're Kyle Hayes, 21 years in Limerick. He's unlikely to change hugely his way of playing in the next 10 years. You only need to do it once and stick it on the computer and you have it for good. You might have a different player to play next year. You could be playing in a different way. And Willie, that goes back a little bit to the conversation I had about Limerick the last day here, that sometimes it serves you to tweak things as you go along, because the opposition has done so much analysis on you and does so much video analysis of you that you can take it that they know everything about you. It would, you need to bring something slightly different to the table here to just to throw them off their game a little bit.
Yeah, no, well, that's it. I suppose it's about forwards having a lot of variety through the game, so that dossier, there's too much for a back to be thinking of. Maybe that's it. Right, great stuff, lads. We'll come back with predictions next. All right, predictions. So, lads, we'll fly through this here because, as usual, we're gone over time. So we have Cork and Tip in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. That's at 7 o'clock. This is on Air Sports. So I suppose the big talking point about Cork, lads, we touched on some of this on Monday, is we're not going to judge them on one game up in Waterford, but we're probably judging them on last year as well, Cheddar. And it's like, Kieran Kingston's coming in. There was a very, very bang of the same old. Do you know what I mean? Of the last 2 years, they've two great under-20 teams. Fair enough, they failed at the final hurdle, but a lot of talent. And on the evidence of Saturday, it was disappointing looking through their team and looking like Kieran Kingston's going with the same kind of lads again.
Yes, to an extent. But look, Wooly, maybe he just doesn't have alternatives. Although I did
a lot of lads with Fitzgibbon maybe, so in his defence.
Yeah, in his defence, he just may not have the personnel that he wants to use. But if I wouldn't maybe comment on last weekend, although it was, they shouldn't allow it to happen, particularly new management coming in. And, you need to find some form here pretty quickly. And look, Munster is a bear pit. So is Leinster, but, we're just on Munster here at the minute. You need to be ready to go at the right time. And I just think I commented before on this. I'm not sure that they have enough quality defenders that can defend properly and that can tackle properly. I think they've got really good defenders that can carry the ball out of the defence and play the possession game that they're very, very good at. And on the other side of the field, they certainly haven't enough players, forwards, who can tackle. They've got brilliant, skillful players. But I've said this a number of times, that as a forward, you depend on quality ball into you. And Brian has explained in terms of making the space in the diagonal run, and that diagonal run might be only 10 metres, but you're dependent on your defender having enough time and enough space to be able to ping the ball to you or wherever it's to go. And Cork depend hugely on this, but that whole game plan depends hugely on a hard tackling and a really, really good tackling forward line. So you have responsibility, of course, a forward's responsibility to make himself available to get the ball and create the score, but he can help himself greatly in that by a really, really good tackling game plan. And that's what I suppose that's what set Kilkenny apart more than anything else in 20 years. And I don't see that in Cork. I see a lot of their players. I can actually see it, visually. They'll do something really good, creative, and if the move breaks down or the ball is turned over, they actually stand and look at it. Yeah. And I'd imagine, I could be wrong, but I'd imagine they mightn't even get into a Brian Cody panel. And I think nobody's saying that they need to become killers. But I think they do need to raise the percentage tackles that they put in. And maybe I'm wrong here, and I'll just finish on that point. I understand that over a number of years, that Henry Shefflin's key statistic was he was by far and away the highest tackler on the Kilkenny team and turn over a ball. And nobody ever, people always spoke about his influence in the team and his scores and his shot creation and all of those things. But actually, it was the other thing that maybe set him apart from everybody else. And I just think that if Cork got those two, they have serious, serious talent. I saw their team in the under-20 final in Port Alicia, under semi-final last year. And they've some serious talent coming up. And I will absolutely say this with certainty, that there are some fair teams around at the minute, but Cork really have the underage structure in the right place, and I think they may very well dominate for a number of years. And incidentally, they have a very, very good management team in their team at the minute as well. And I'll suggest that the next manager of Cork's within that group. I think Pat McCahey is in it. Christy O'Connor is in that group. There's some serious hurling thinking men in that group, and I think they will sort that out. I think he's got to wait until he has all his players back to be able to do that.
Right, Dunlugs over the minors as well. Of course, the last time Kingston came in, he shocked. Was it Tipperary, the All-Ireland champions in 2017 in Thurles? It was a brilliant game. I was at it, and this was when we first saw Coleman and Fitzgibbon, and we saw Kingston and these lads, and we saw the Nash puck-outs where he was pucking it into space and the movement of the half-forwards. And since then, that Nash puck-out has been kind of found out, where that space is easy to create, I suppose, Brian, and they've struggled off those puck-outs, and they don't have any enforcers or devilment or I do take Cheddar's point of view, or point that they stand up. They don't seem to have that ravenous work rate that other teams have.
No, I think Cheddar summed it up perfectly. Now, they have brought Damien Catalan back in. He didn't get very, very little game time last year, and he's that type of raw individual. Now, they had him on the half back line, and he popped up the field, and I think he could have even got 3 points for a finish. Aside of the game, you probably wouldn't have seen from him. But
up front, though, you see, up front.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. But even you see, their backs aren't. They're not raw enough. They're conceding way too many scores.
Yeah.
Essentially, when it gets down into it.
But is that because the work rate up front is there's a knock on, like a backs are only as good as their.
I fully take that point. But like the thing for me would be the fact that it got into a battle against Kilkenny last year. There was only going to be one winner then. You just knew it. Knowing very little about hurling, you just know that. And Kilkenny were always going to bring the battle that day. And that's where Cork have failed time and time again. Any good All-Ireland winning team, they have to have a mix. There has to be horses for courses. But fully take the point. All forwards have to be working their arse off. The game has completely moved on. And they have to be working so hard, but they've gifted players. Like obviously Patrick Horgan is arguably one of the forwards of a generation. He's spoken along with Christy Ring as one of Cork's best ever hurlers. Alan Cadigan on his day is just gifted. You have Mark Coleman, you have Darragh Fitzgibbon. They're beautiful hurlers on the ball. They're magicians. But it's that steely side to the game that Cork are certainly missing. And I thought John Myler last year brought in Aidan Walsh to try and bring in that side of it as well.
But Aidan Walsh isn't Aidan Walsh played football for long enough. Like, Aidan Walsh gets dominated in games. He doesn't have devilment in him.
No,
Aidan
I know
Walsh
that
is actually a timid sort of fella, I think.
Yeah, they brought him in looking at his physicality. He's a huge athlete.
He's a huge athlete, but I don't think he uses it. No, he doesn't use it.
No, not at all. No.
Which is disappointing. Like, if I was a manager,
I can see why they tried him.
Yeah,
that was their thought process. Obviously, a ball winning half forward or even at full forward. They tried him last year.
Yeah, he should be horsing into fellas with the size of Aidan Walsh. I've said this in football as well, but not to get too caught up in it. Get predictions here quickly, Cheddar. We move off.
I just want to go back on that point. I think Aidan Walsh is a different type of player. I think he has a real role to play as a wing forward, air game, so on. I think what they're really missing, and they may not have it, there's no point in talking about it. If you don't have it, you don't have it. But they're really missing that grafting type player at 11. And when you go back through Cork over the years, you go back through Tim Crowley, you go back through Gerald McCarthy, and I can go back a little bit further to Pat Hegarty from Youghal, who were, you call them here one time uncompromising hurlers, who just made things happen around the team. And I suppose the best of them all in our time was John Power from Kilkenny.
Yeah.
There were selfless players who may not have been rated as being the skillful players in the team and all of that, but by God, you would take them out of it, and then you'd really know that they were missing. And I think Brian will explain this an awful lot better, in terms of sort of forward play. That when you have a player around like that, they suck in defenders to them. They just give you that small little bit of space that the top players at this level just need to be able to get the shot away in that. And just Cork seem to be missing that type of player at the minute.
And the last two they had on the half hour, no coincidence, the one All-Irelands was Niall McCarthy and Timmy McCarthy. Timmy was coming towards the end of his career, but brilliant at doing exactly what he wanted: win prime possession, running with the ball, offloading to the likes of Ben O'Connor, Joe Dean, etc.
And Niall McCarthy was a very combative player, wasn't he? He really did get stuck in. Yeah.
Yeah. No, look, he'd take his point on when needed as well. He had a couple of really big All-Irelands, and that always was a bonus. That's what you wanted from that was a bonus if they chipped in with 2 or 3 points.
You had your man in try as well, centre forward, didn't you? Another similar type of player, was he? Or he's skillful enough.
He was a different player. He was a different player. He was a gifted distributor.
He was able to mix it. He was able to mix it too if he needed to be. In fairness to him, he was able to look after himself, but he was gifted. He could make the ball sing. He could play it either way, to be fair to him.
Right, okay, so I'm half right. He could do it either way. All right, so we'll get a call on this, lads. Just in one word, Cork or Tip? Chaddar?
Look, I'll go with Cork. I think they have I know Tip have to win it as well, but probably in a different place. I think I suppose you just need to know in terms of having Fitzgibbon players back and that. I know Cork or UCC won last night. Will they have some players back, and are they going to be playing on Sunday? But I just think they have got to step up here and on their own ground, and that they've got to win it. Okay,
what about you, Brian? Quickly,
I'll go with Tip.
Okay, Westmeath Waterford. We're not going to look at that one today. Limerick Galway is probably the game of the weekend. Really, but there's 3 great games this weekend: Cork, Tip, Clare, Wexford. Limerick Galway. Laois Dublin is a big game as well. We'll cover that a little bit on Monday. Dublin, you might be a little bit worried considering how poor Dublin were last week going away to them. Surely they have something in them after their performance against Kilkenny.
I saw that match actually, Willie, and I have to say I was disappointed with Dublin. Kilkenny didn't have anywhere near their full strength out. Now, as I explained this last week, that would mean nothing in Kilkenny. There's a lot of quality players. But what worried me a little bit about Dublin was, after last year, you would expect them to be, on the right track this year. And Matty might say, well, look, we got it wrong last year, our timing was wrong and all of that. And I don't think that's the case. I think Dublin...
That was an excuse. I said that on Monday, Cheddar, because their best performance of the year was against Galway, the game before, and they got out of the Leinster Championship.
Yeah, and if you look at it, we were talking about this last week. Dublin have the potential to really do something here. There's without a shadow of a doubt about that. They have all the right things to do it. But one of the things that they need to do is start beating these big teams on a regular basis, not dissimilar to what Wexford are doing at the moment, and building confidence, self-belief in the way you play and about yourself and all of that. And I just thought that their short game was really short last Sunday. And the pace of actually carrying the ball out of the defence was quite slow, and the distribution was very, very poor. And they had some really, you was the likes of Ushin and O'Rourke on that inside, who were really skillful, intelligent forwards. But the type of ball that went into them and the quickness of the ball going into them, that certainly wasn't going to suit them. So I think Dublin really need to up their game here and start winning matches. And I think Matty needs to change that around a little bit and not just loll through a league here and we're going to ramp it up then for the championship. Brian Cody, I just keep referring back to him, has done 20 years of this, won, I don't know how many leagues he's won, he's certainly played in 11 finals, I think. The only reason he's did it is because he knows it's the right way to approach the championship. And he knows that the conditioning and the way he's able to approach his team and all of that will get it right. Now, there may be in some years the team was so good it was going to win anyway. But I'm just surprised the way Dublin are approaching that.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. I'm afraid to ask you predictions on Limerick Galway in case we'll be here another 10 minutes because we're nearly running out of time. That's obviously a big one in the Gaelic grounds. 2 favourites really based on our predictions to come out of that division, and Shane O'Neill going against his own county. That'll be a big one. I'm sure we'll talk about that. That's on TG Catter on live coverage. Just quickly, a prediction on that, Limerick or Galway? I suppose a toss-up, really, 2 good teams.
Yeah, I'd be going for Limerick personally. I am obviously very impressed with their second half against Tipperary, but just listening to John Kiley again, he's another one that you love listening to. He acknowledged that you can't keep doing what they did the last day. Slow start in the first half. He alluded to the All-Ireland semi-final last year against Kilkenny too. Yeah. While he's pleased with the response and the way that they dug out a victory, he still knows it's not going to be good enough come championship. And I think in the Gaelic grounds, I think they're really going to go for it. Galway are still figuring out their team. They're still figuring out what's actually working for them. So I just think Limerick will just have too much for them on this particular occasion. So I'm looking forward to being down there. I'm actually commentating on Sunday.
You're doing that? All right, that's a good one to get. That's a good one. This doesn't feel like work, Brian, heading down to the Gaelic grounds.
Certainly not.
Just quickly,
the wife can't be given out now,
Yeah, you can get to a match now and it's just work, right? So there's no complaint. Nothing can be said at all. It's fantastic. I use it a lot, Brian. Don't worry about that. The Cheddar, just quickly, I was reading about David Burke. So David Burke went travelling. It's a very funny one in that Galway have been out of action since last June, right? Competitive action. And it's another interesting talking point in that they had no manager until November, so they were actually in limbo, players, and you have to be highly motivated, I suppose, keep doing your gym work and stay ticking over when you have no manager or no one tracking you. Now, I know they have the same S&C lads, so maybe they were being tracked, so don't want to say too much about that. But it was interesting that David Burke went away travelling, and he came back. Must have gone away travelling. He came back for the All-Ireland semi-final against Boris Ali, played that. He might as well have stayed where he was because he was completely anonymous in that game, and then went back travelling again. And now he's going to come back from Galway. And I was thinking it was one player from Galway. He's such an inspirational leader for them. He needed that break, didn't he, Chaddar? Because he wasn't even in great form last year for Galway.
Yeah, I think it'll do them no harm.
Yeah.
Look, it's not ideal to start that late. There's a lot of signs around the conditioning program that teams will be on, and the seasons within that, and not necessarily that, but the months broken down into intensity weeks and non-intensity weeks and so on and so on. And of course, when the window gets tighter, it's more difficult to do all of those things right. But on the flip side of that,
sorry to go across you. Sorry, I'm gonna have to go.
Okay, go on,
Yeah,
Brian.
sorry,
You work away.
We're after going through a whole lunch and class, another class. Lads, public sector.
That's ridiculous. Go on, Brian. Go on.
Mind yourself, Brian.
Chat to you next week.
Go on. Good luck.
Bye-bye.
Okay, can just answer that question again on David Burke. Yeah, I'll say to you, I think he probably needed a break.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. For David and maybe for Galway, but on the other side of that, look, it's not ideal to be starting late because the programs are they're so well refined now, and there's a lot of science behind this in terms of when you need to start the pre-season, how long it is, when you switch over from long speed to short speed, and it was rather a conditioning person to explain this who was properly qualified in it. And even your weeks are broken down into intense weeks, non-intense weeks, and when you tighten up that window, it makes it much more difficult to get these things done in the scientific way.
Yeah.
On the flip side of all of that, you're starting late, a team is very, very hungry, they want to get started, and there's a great energy in the dressing room.
Freshness, yeah.
There's a freshness in it, and I can actually, now that we just asked the question, I can remember year one, my first year going in with Laois, we started very, very late, and we trained like animals. We double trained a lot of the time, just trying to catch up. But there was actually a great energy in the whole thing, just trying to get going on that. Now I qualify all what I'm saying, and at least we're in Division 2 at the time, so you had a little bit of room to experiment and do things, whereas in Division 1 you have no room. It's flat to the mat the whole time. Obviously Galway were playing Limerick, that just puts it into context. But I think for Galway, Galway obviously are happy enough that they're going to stay in the league. I wouldn't think that the league is there. They'll want to win matches. You don't want to lose matches. We explained all of that last week. But their real goal is winning Leinster and getting back on the championship trail and win another All-Ireland. They probably have some players, Wooly, that the years are their years are running out. They need to make hay now while the sun shines. So I think they have plenty of time to get there, and clearly they have the same conditioning people, and there may very well be programs going. I'd be amazed if there wasn't programs going on in the background where players are being tested and all of the right things to be done in the off season were being done. It's just that they haven't come together collectively, and there's no harm in that. Too much collective training can lead to sort of psychological fatigue with the teams sometimes. It depends on where you are and your level of motivation and where the team is and all of those things. There's always context around these things. One fit won't fit everything. Yeah. So look, I'll answer. I think certainly with the new management, new energy in the dressing room, I think they'll be okay, and I think their goals may be a little bit different. They'll have enough in them to stay in the league. That's all they'll want. They'll want to win matches and pick some matches. But I think on Sunday, I think Limerick will be just a little bit ahead of them in preparations. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant stuff. Thanks very much, lads. We've gone over time as usual. We'll be back on Monday, and JJ and Michael are going to be in. So we might talk to Michael a little bit about what's going on with Dublin. Hopefully after 2 losses in their first 2 games, Chaddar. We'll talk to you then. Good luck.